Resourceful Designer Episode 50, Perks to Running a Graphic Design Business.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He was always the tallest guy in his class, Mark DeCote.
Welcome to the podcast. I am so happy that you've joined me for this 50th episode of Resourceful Designer. Wow, it's hard to believe that I'm already up to 50 episodes, and I really wish I had something special planned for this one, but alas, I don't. In fact, I don't even have the episode I told you about last week. Last week I mentioned that this episode will be all about presenting to your design clients, and I'm still going to do that next week, but that's a bigger episode, and due to time constraints this week, I just didn't get around to preparing for it the way I really wanted to. So I decided to take next week's topic and move it to this week because it's one that doesn't require as much prep work. And I'm really making an effort to try to get an episode out to you every single week without missing any. So even though this is my 50th episode, a very nice milestone, there's really nothing special other than the topic I'm going to talk about today, which is the perks of running a graphic design business. Now, before I get to all of that, I'd love to read this brand new iTunes review that came in from Think Dan from Canada. And he wrote, even though Mark targets designers who run their own business from home, all designers will benefit from the topics discussed in this podcast. I have personally gleaned an incredible amount of useful information and resources from Mark to strengthen both my passion for design and my business. I strongly recommend you have a listen to this podcast. Many thanks, Mark. Well, thank you for that, Think Dan. And you know what? He's right. I've received so many thanks and emails and comments from people who are not graphic designers who listen to the podcast. And I just want to thank you. If you are one of those people, thank you for listening. Even though I don't make this podcast specifically for you, it is geared for graphic designers, specifically graphic designers who are running a home-based business just like I am. Think Dan was right. There are a lot of useful information that I give you and resources that are a benefit for people in similar industries. I've received notes from industrial designers, fashion designers, interior designers, product designers, SEO specialists, marketers, all sorts of people who are not specifically graphic designers, but have sent me a note just to say that they really appreciate everything I do and to keep up the great work. So even though I am always going to focus this podcast on designers, specifically home-based graphic designers, I am extremely grateful if you don't fall under that category and you still tune in to listen. And now on to my resource of the week. Now, as I've stated before, the resources that I share with you are all things that I've tried or have some personal experience or know something about. I usually don't share resources that I've never seen or just stuff that I pick off the internet. It's something because I want to share some value with you. And yes, sometimes they're affiliate links, and I do make money off of them if you chose to use my links and purchase them or whatever. But again, it's always something that I believe in or that I've personally used. I will never share anything with you just for the sake of trying to make a couple of bucks off of it. For example, I could promote FreshBooks on this podcast. In fact, I was approached by them to be a sponsor for this podcast. But I don't personally use FreshBooks. I use a program called Billings Pro, and I'm perfectly happy with it. So I will not promote FreshBooks on this podcast to you because I've never used it, and it wouldn't be fair for me to make money, a commission off sales on it, when it's not something that I personally use. Now, with all that said, this week's resource is actually a product that I haven't used. Now, I did do a lot of research into it, and that's why I feel comfortable sharing it with you today. So this week's resource is actually something that I discovered through the Resourceful Designer Facebook group when Dan posted that he was looking for a solution to tracking his time for his business. You see the sort of things we discuss in the Facebook group? If you're not a member, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/group and join the Facebook group, and you can get into conversations all about your graphic design business. Well, Dan was looking for a solution to keep track of his time for his projects and all sorts of stuff, and he came across one called Top Tracker. From what I could see, looks like the perfect resource if you don't already have a way of keeping track of your time. And I mean keeping track right down to the second of how much time you spent working on a job. Now, I'll read what Dan wrote in the Facebook group here. He says, I know Mark uses Billing Pro, but I don't use a Mac currently. So I searched around for an alternate. I checked out a few and decided that there is a better one for me. I've been using Top Tracker to track my time. It's excellent, easy, flexible, and can spit out a ton of different reports for you to prove your time if you need it. And best of all, it's free forever for freelancers. Now, as I said, after Dan posted this in the Facebook group, I decided to go check it out. And I agree with him. This looks like a great resource. If you are not on Mac, because as I mentioned, I promote Billings Pro. It's what I use to keep track of all the time I spend working on projects as well as invoicing. Billings Pro does both the invoicing and time tracking. Top Tracker here is only time tracking. There's no invoicing in that involved. You have to find another software or another way to send out your invoices. But from what I see from looking at the website, this is a very solid platform. Now, some of the things it mentions is the effortless time tracking from any device, whether it's your laptop, your computer, or your mobile device. You can start tracking on your mobile device while you're visiting a client or a consult or that, and then continue tracking from your computer when you're back at home. Now, it offers a centralized view of all your projects. It has full privacy controls for freelancers. So if you hire somebody and you want them to add their time to it, you could get them to do that without them seeing the stuff that you're working on, the time you're spending, or the other projects you have on the go. It has very detailed productivity reports in case somebody wants to know, well, how much time did you spend on this or on that? You can break it out in a report and show them all this. This product is 100% free and there's no limits to it. There's no superficial limits on the number of projects or the number of users you can configure. And best of all, it's available on Windows, Mac OS, and on Linux. So every graphic designer should be keeping track of their time. And it's easy to say, well, I started this job at noon and I finished around 2, but really, that's not accurate enough for this day and age. You really need something that you can stop and pause in order to keep track of your time right down to the minute. And I want to thank Dan for posting this in the Facebook group because it is a great resource. And when I saw it, I really wanted to share it with you because, as you know, I'm a Mac person and I really didn't have an equivalent to the Billings Pro that I use for time tracking for anybody who's not on a Mac because Billings Pro is only a Mac-based software. Now, once again, Top Tracker is not meant for billing or for invoicing. It's only for keeping track of your time. Now, if it's something you want to check out and see, it's absolutely free to try. So what's the harm? Please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/tracker, and that'll redirect you to the page where you can sign up and give it a whirl. So thanks for that recommendation, Dan. And now, perks to running a graphic design business. There are so many benefits to running your own graphic design business, especially running one from home. And I covered a lot of those in episode 24, including getting to choose who you work with, who your clients are, making your own hours, deciding your rates and how much you want to charge, as well as other things like the tax breaks you can get, and just being able to work in your bathrobe if you want to. Now, all of these are great reasons to want to run a graphic design business, especially one that you're running from home. But I'm not talking about the benefits today. I'm talking about perks. You know, little things that go a bit beyond those benefits. So I'm going to cover 7 perks today that you may or may not be aware of if you're running your business. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is free stuff. Now, who doesn't like getting free stuff? And when you're running a business, a registered business, now, I don't know if this happens to freelancers who are just working from home and don't actually have a business. They're just a graphic designer and they do stuff from home. But people that have a registered business actually get put onto lists, and different companies will look for these people and start sending you things. Ever since I've registered my business, I've received pens in the mail with my business name on it. I've received keychains with my company name on it. I've received special squeegees to clean my computer monitor, which, in all honesty, they're junk and I end up tossing them anyways. Stress balls, and all sorts of neat gadgets that they send you as samples, hoping that you might in turn want to turn around and sell them to your clients. Now, once you set yourself up with suppliers, a lot of them will send you stuff as well. I've received numerous t-shirts over the years from suppliers or companies I've dealt with, as well as baseball caps. I received a jacket once, and simpler things like notepads and duffels and tote bags, all sorts of stuff that's absolutely free. if you've got a registered business, people just send you these things. Now, I have to say that the best free thing I have due to my business is my magazine subscriptions. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there are many, many different magazines related to our industry. And if you go to the magazine's website and you look up and they will say a subscription to this magazine might be $20, $30, $40, $50, depending on the magazine. But sometimes you could find a link on that website that says, if you qualify by being a business in the industry, they will send you a free subscription. Now, I know here in Canada, since I've started my business, I've had subscriptions to Design Edge, Graphic Monthly, Printer Magazine, Sign Magazine, and there's one more right now that's slipping my mind. But I've never paid for any of these magazines. And I'm not talking digital ebooks or links to a web magazine or anything like that. I'm talking delivered in your mailbox paper versions of these magazines. And I've been receiving them for years and I've never paid. The only thing they ask is that once a year, they give you a website to go to and you have to renew your subscription to let them know that you're still in business. Now, the purpose for them doing this is they think you're a business. They don't know that you're working from home. They feel that if they send you this magazine, first of all, you might pass it around to your employees, or you might leave it on a counter and somebody coming in might get an interest and want to subscribe to it. Not to mention, they make most of their money from the ads in the magazine. And that's what's really good about these magazines. I have actually contacted many people from the ads in these magazines when I need something, a special supplier for something, or I have a special job that has something different about it. And I'll find somebody through one of these magazines. Last year, I had a project for a client where they had these little magnets, fridge magnets, but they wanted them sent out to their clients attached to a postcard. So I needed to find somebody that was able to attach these magnets to a postcard with that tacky, I forget what it's called, but it's like a tacky type glue thing. And I didn't know who did that stuff. My local printers don't do that sort of thing. But I actually found somebody in an ad in one of these free magazines I got. So that is a great perk for your business, is these sort of free things, magazines, pens, keychains, t-shirts. Just the fact that you have a registered business allows you to receive these benefits. So that's the first perk I wanted to talk about. Free stuff. Now, what might be even better than free stuff is free travel. Now, no, nobody's going to say, oh, look, you have a registered business, so I'm going to send you on a trip. But you know what? There are a lot of credit card companies out there that allow you to collect points that you could then use for travel purposes. And if you're running a graphic design business, you have to purchase things. So why not put them on credit card and get points? Now, in last week's episode, I talked about print brokering to supplement your graphic design business. Now, if you do print brokering, having a credit card with travel points on it is almost a must. Imagine having a $10,000 print job and just giving the printer your credit card number and collecting all those points. Not to mention all your subscriptions, whether it's software or purchases for anything to do with your business, whether it's online or in person, use that credit card. Even if you have the money in the bank, use the credit card and then pay the credit card right away. But collect those points. Now, points don't always have to be used for travel. The credit card I use, the points I collect can also be used for rewards. So maybe you want to collect enough points to get yourself a free computer, or treat your spouse to something special that you collected via points that doesn't cost you a cent. So that's my second perk for running your own graphic design business, is use your credit card that collects points and use it for all purchases, especially if you are print brokering, and you will see those points will accumulate very quickly. Now, along the same lines as these credit cards is another perk you get from running a business is you do get better access to credit, which includes credit cards. Now, I don't advocate borrowing money to start your business. It's better if you have the money, but some people, when they're in a bind, might need to get a little bit of money from a bank or from some investment firm, some sort of loan. Well, if you do need that, say for some reason something happens and you have to spend a few $1,000s on a new computer and you don't have it, you can get a loan much, much easier if you are running a registered business. And it doesn't matter if it's incorporated, if it's a sole proprietorship or a partnership or whatever. If you have a registered business, banks and financial institutions will be much more inclined to lend you the money. Now, some people might say, well, that's not really a perk because now you've got the money, but you're in debt. But sometimes things just happen in life and you need the money. So it is a perk to know that it's there and much easier for you to get. because you own a business. Now, the fourth perk I want to talk about is just the networking you do when you create a business. When you're working for somebody else and you go out and you start talking to people and they say, oh, what do you do? Well, I'm a graphic designer and I work for so-and-so. And they say, oh, well, that's nice. And that's the end of the conversation. You work for such and such a company. They might ask you some questions about your job, but the interest is not really in you. But when you are running your own business and you tell people, when they say, what do? You say, well, I'm a graphic designer. I run my own business. Now, all of a sudden, this kind of piques their curiosity and it makes you seem to be much more credible and much more important than if you had been working for somebody else. If you're at one of these networking events and you introduce yourself and you say you have a design business, maybe the person that you're talking to doesn't require your services, but they might all of a sudden go, hey, wait a minute, let me introduce you to Tim over here. Tim, you were talking that you needed some stuff done or that. Here's Mark. He's a graphic designer and he owns his own graphic design business. Well, now all of a sudden, Tim is interested and he wants to talk to me. Whereas if I had talked to that same person and said, hi, I'm Mark and I work for this other company, would that person have introduced me to Tim, knowing that maybe I'm not the person to talk to? Maybe he might have some questions about graphic design, but as far as working together, maybe Tim already knows that other company, or maybe I'm not the person. I don't deal with people. I just design and there's somebody else they should be talking to and so forth. So when you own your own graphic design business, it opens up a lot of doors that wouldn't be open otherwise. Not to mention, you get to meet some really great people that you wouldn't have met if you were working somewhere else. I mean, the clients that come to you are coming to you for a specific purpose. They're coming for your skills, for your knowledge, and for the relationship you can build with them. And you get to know stuff about them and their business. If they were dealing with a company, they might have a front person, somebody they talk to, but there's so many people working on their project that they don't get to know and they don't get to create those relationships like you do. Since I've been in business, I've learned more about the theater industry than I ever did before, about the DJ, disc jockeying, about that industry. I've learned about woodworking. I've learned how medical clinics operate. I've learned what goes on behind the scenes of running a sports team, and so many other things that I learned because of the relationships I have with my clients that I wouldn't necessarily have if I was not running my own business. If I was working as a graphic designer at some agency, there would probably be somebody else building that relationship with the client and then passing on that information to me. So I wouldn't gain all that knowledge that I have now. So that is a great perk. It's just all the stuff that you learn and get to know and discover because you are a business person running your own business. Now, speaking of learning, that brings me to my fifth perk. And that's, well, learning. The education that you give yourself as you're a business person. You get to make the decisions on what you want to learn, when you want to learn them, and also on the stuff you don't want to learn. When I got into web design, it was up to me. I decided I wanted to learn HTML and CSS and PHP and MySQL. But I stopped there. I decided I didn't want to learn JavaScript. And that was my decision because I decided that I wasn't going to do JavaScript. In fact, after learning PHP and MySQL, I decided that I'm not good enough at that, so I'm not going to do it. If I need somebody for that, I will hire out. And that was my prerogative. I got to choose what I wanted to learn and what I didn't want to learn. If you're working for somebody else and there's some new gadget or website or code language or that, your employer might come to you and say, I want you to learn this. And it might not be something that really interests you, but now you're forced to, okay, I'm going to try to learn how to do this because my employer wants to go in that direction. And you don't really have much say in the matter. Well, I suppose you could say, no, I don't want to learn it, but then you might be compromising your job and your employer could say, well, I'll just hire somebody who does know how to do that. And because of that, you're going to hunker down and you're going to try to learn it whether you want to or not. Well, when you're running your own business, you have the say. Are you a web designer who wants to get into print design and learn about the printing side of things and how the printing industry works in order to create better files for printing? Well, you can do that if you want. Now, if you're a web designer and you don't care at all about the printing side of the industry, you don't have to learn any of it. The choice is entirely up to you. And I think this is a huge perk to running your own business, is you get to decide what you learn, where you learn, Do you just go to YouTube and watch videos about stuff? Or do you purchase a course that teaches you how to do all these things? It's entirely up to you. So that is my 5th perk to share with you. Now, perk number 6 is just the work-life balance that you get from running your own business. Yes, you can put as many hours as you want into your business. You can work 16, 18 hours a day if you really wanted to. But you can also just put in 4, 3, 2 hours a day if you want to. You get to choose the work-life balance that you want. Maybe when you're single or you're dating, you might want to put in a little bit more hours and just see your girlfriend or boyfriend on the weekends and that sort of thing. And then maybe after you're married, you might cut it back. And maybe once you have kids, you're going to cut it back again for a little while and maybe only put in 2 or 3 hours a day as you're helping out with the whole new situation at home. I am extremely grateful for this whole work-life balance thing that I can do. Last year, I moved my father out of his home into a retirement home. He has dementia, so his short-term memory is not that great. And he was forgetting a lot of things. And because of that, I decided to move him with his consent into a retirement home. Beautiful place. In fact, I'm a little jealous of all the benefits and perks that he gets living there. But in the process, I also took his car keys away. Because of his short-term memory loss, he was going out driving and then forgetting where he was or forgetting how to get back home. Especially with his memory loss, I was afraid that if he went out for a drive, he would end up going back to the house instead of to his new apartment at the residence. So by taking his car keys away now, he no longer has a way to get around town. So if he needs something at the grocery store, if he has doctor's appointments, and we all know he's 89 years old, so you know that there's lots of stuff to do with doctors, I'm the one that has to take him to those doctor's appointments. So because of the work-life balance of running my own business, I can take off anytime I want. When the doctors call to schedule an appointment for him and they ask me what time or day works best for you, no, it's not what works best for me. What do you have available? And I'll make my work life work around that. I mean, the same applies to my own appointments. If I have to go to the dentist or the doctor, before I had to worry about, could I take the time off if they wanted to give me an afternoon appointment, or no, maybe can you try to make an appointment closer to 5 o'clock? I was done at 4:30. Maybe I can rush there at 5 o'clock. Well, now it's, I want an appointment on such and such a day. I don't care what time you have available. I'll be able to make it because I can adjust my work schedule. So that is another huge perk to running your own business is the work-life balance. You have kids in sports. When my daughter was on a competitive soccer team and she would have tournaments that are in Kingston, Ontario, which is almost a 2-hour drive from here. And if she had a 6 o'clock game, it was no big deal for me to say, okay, at 3:30 in the afternoon, that's it. I'm done for the day. Let's hop in the car and take off to go to your soccer game. And I didn't have to ask anybody for permission to leave early or bank time or use up holiday time in order to do that. So huge perk is the whole work-life balance. Now, the last perk I want to share with you is one that I think is maybe even the best perk. And that's why I saved it for last. And that's when you create a business, you get to create the character or the personality around that business. Now, it might sound strange, but your business does have a personality. And that comes across in your stationery, your website, your advertising, your marketing material. All the stuff that you put forth, that people see, creates a personality for your business. And it's something that you get to decide. When you're working for somebody else, you have no say in what the business looks like, unless you're maybe a partner or one of the managers or something. But if you're just an employee, a graphic designer working at some agency, the agency has a personality and you have to mold yourself to that personality. Is it an agency that has a very corporate feel to it? We are a serious design agency. We want all our employees to come to work wearing suits and ties. And we talk to our clients about how we can help with ROIs and SEO and marketing algorithms and analytics and all sorts of stuff that, yes, is important, but could sound a little stuffy. Or maybe it's an agency that is a little laid back and everybody comes to work in jeans and a t-shirt. And instead of talking about SEO and analytics, they talk to their clients about how they can improve customer relations by creating relationships, maybe creating proper sales funnels in order to win over people. And anyways, it could be a completely different mentality. It's the personality of the business. Well, when you're running your own business, you get to create that personality. If you want, you can have your website say something like, such and such creative agency. We've been helping businesses succeed in this area for over 25 years. Or you can have the website that says, hey, I'm a graphic designer. My job is to make you look good, and I'd love to work with you. So why don't you give me a call, and we'll put our two heads together and see what we could come up with to help your business. You can even go whimsical if you want. Hi, I'm Mark. I'm the best graphic designer in the area. Or at least I think I am. You want to challenge me on that? Well, no problem. Let's get together, discuss your project. You get to tell me how much money you're going to throw my way. And in turn, I'm going to tell you what sort of amazing things I can do for you. So let's meet at my place, or if you want, I could come over to your place, but whoever's hosting supplies the coffee and cookies. So are we on? See, that's the sort of thing I mean. You can create a personality for your business through your website, through your stationery, through your marketing material, even things like your voicemail. My voicemail on my phone right now says this. Hi, you've reached Mark Dakota Marksman Design. I'm not here right now, but you know what to do. Here comes the beep. Now, if I was working in some agency, do you think they would have some sort of message like that? No, it would be something along the lines of, hi, you've reached such and such an agency. We can't come to the phone right now, but your message is important to us. So please leave your name, number, and a short message, and somebody will get back to you as short as possible. Well, if that's the sort of message you like or you want, you can do it. But you know what? We're designers. We're creative people. If somebody calls and they hear my voicemail, and all I do is tell them, I'm not here, you know what to do, here comes the beep. If they can't see the humor in that, I don't want to deal with them. So I think out of all the perks, free stuff is great. Collecting points on your credit card in order to travel to exotic places, yeah, that's wonderful. Better access to money and loans if you need it is great. And meeting people that you would never have got to meet otherwise is really, really good and wonderful. And the whole learning and education, get to study the things you want, and the whole work-life balance are all great perks to running a home-based graphic design business. But I think the best one out of all of them is the last one, creating that personality. You've got nobody telling you what to do. If you want your website to be blue, make it blue. If you want your website to be green, make it green. If you want to have unicorns and rainbows on your website, go for it. I don't know how that'll help your clients, but if it's something you want to do, you are in control. You create that personality. If you're a young designer that likes to stand out in the crowd, I don't know, maybe you've got short, spiky hair that's colored blue. Well, you can translate that into the personality of your business. And that personality can help niche you down, can help you attract the clientele you want. If that's the type of person you are, you grew up at the skateboard park, maybe you have a spiked mohawk, well, maybe the clients you're going after might not be the corporate lawyer or that new dentist's office that's opening up in town, but that engineer who just invented some solar-powered unicycle that's going to take the world by storm. They might look at you and say, you are the person I want to work with. And that's what I mean by creating a personality for your business, and why I think it's the strongest and maybe the most important perk to running your own graphic design business. Because you are the only person in control, and the sky's the limit on what you do. So those are my perks. Did I miss something? Is there a perk that you get that I didn't mention, something that you want to share? Please visit the show notes page at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 50 and leave a comment there, letting me and others know what sort of perks do you get from running your business. I would love to hear from you. And now it's time for this week's question of the week. Now, this week's question comes in from Sean, and I have to apologize, Sean. Your question came in months and months and months ago, and somehow it got misplaced. And I was just going through stuff. I was cleaning some stuff up on the weekend, and I came across it, and I says, oh, wow, I completely missed this question. So I apologize for taking so long to answer it. But with that said, I am running low on questions. I think I only have enough for the next 2 episodes. I'll have to go through my list again, but I think I've answered everything that's been submitted except for 2 questions so far. So if you have a question you want to ask me about running a graphic design business or running a home-based business, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and send me your questions for a future episode of the podcast. Now, here's what Sean had to say. He says, I have a few questions about budgets and pricing. Your pricing podcast was amazing, but here are some questions that you may want to include in a future podcast episode. And then he goes on to list a bunch of things, and I'll just read through them quickly before I answer anything. He wanted to know about, how do you ask a client for their budget? Should it be on a project questionnaire? Should it be on the contact form for them to answer before they even contact you? Do you give them price ranges? Or would it be better off to allow them to enter a price on their own? Should you state somewhere your minimum prices to do a project in order to weed out the people that might not have that sort of budget? And finally, what happens to the price that you come up with if it doesn't agree to the prospect's budget? Do we just disregard them, or should we be open to considering that this is a business first and then design? So thank you for the questions, Sean. I'm going to try to form my answer so that I cover a little bit of everything that you asked here. As far as asking a client for a budget, I've always found the direct approach to be the best one. And that is, when I'm talking to a client, I'll just ask them, do you have a budget for this? I know it's uncomfortable and people don't like to ask that sort of thing because you're always afraid that they're going to think if they say they have a $5,000 budget, then you're automatically going to go up to maybe $499 or something like that. Or if they have a $10,000 budget, but the job was only going to be a $2,000 job, you might raise your prices because of their budget. But you just have to assure the client that you're not asking them for their budget in order to gouge them or to raise your prices. You want to know what they're realistically thinking, because depending on their budget will affect the way you quote and handle the job. If their budget allows it, then you can hire a photographer to go out and take professional photos. If their budget does not allow it, then you might have to revert to using stock photography. If their budget allows it, you might be able to hire in some high-end developers in order to create special parts for their website and that. But if their budget doesn't allow it, you might have to rely on whatever WordPress plugins you might be able to find. So asking a client for their budget is very, very important, but you have to let them know that you're not doing it in order to gouge your price or to try to get as much out of them. You're doing it in order to figure out exactly what is the best option in order to complete the project that they're bringing to you. And if you explain it correctly, your clients will be happy to share that with you. And they'll be even happier if they come up to you and they say, we've got a $10,000 budget. And you say, okay, thank you. And then you come back and you say, well, the price for this project will be $6,000. Right there, they're going to know this person is legit. They're not trying to take advantage of me. And it's somebody that I can deal with. Or if they come up and they say, we have a $10,000 budget, you can come out and say, look, I've got 3 options here. Here's option A, which will cost you $6,000. Here's option B, that'll cost you $9,000. And I also put forward option C, but it's outside your budget. This one will cost $12,000, but here's what you would get out of that. And clients will also appreciate that. If they really want to, they can go with the lower option A. They have the budget for option B, but then if they really like what's available in option C, they might be able to squeeze in. Sometimes they'll come to you and they say, we have a budget of $5,000, but really they have about $8,000 to spend. They just don't want to tell you that because, hey, they're in business. They don't want to spend money if they don't have to. But if you go to them and say, I've got an option for you that's a little bit over your budget, they might be willing to move that budget. Now, as for whether it should be on your contact form or your questionnaire, I have never done that. I don't like that form. I prefer talk to them. I prefer find out what the project is, the details they want, start thinking about it as they're discussing the project with me. I start thinking about it in my mind and trying to piece together what's required, what's needed. Can I do it all myself? Do I have to get outside help? And then I approach them with the question of the budget. And as I said, I explain to them why I need to know the budget. Can I get outside help or do I have to do everything myself? Is snapping a few photos with my iPhone good enough or do I hire a photographer? That's all sorts of stuff that you mention to them and say, I've got to know all this stuff, so I need to know your budget. So I never ask on a questionnaire because that seems intimidating. And most people, if you're not able to explain the situation to them, will probably undervalue or it might scare people away. If you put out a questionnaire for them and it says, what's your budget? Especially if you give them different tiers, like my budget is $2,000 to $5,000, $5,000 to $10,000, $10,000 to $20,000. They might look at this and say, you know what? My budget is $11,000, but the option is $10,000 to $20,000. I don't want him to think I have a $20,000 budget because I only have $11,000 to spend. So I would never, ever use that option. And it's also the same reason I would never just leave an open field for somebody to fill in what their budget is without actually talking to them. So that's why I prefer do it, whether it's on the phone or face-to-face. I always like asking them for their budget in that way. And if they don't have one or they don't know, they'll say it, but I still get my chance to explain why I would like to know what their budget is, because it will affect how I quote the job. Now, I personally never have a minimum project price for anything, because I'll take just about any work that comes in. And yes, my rates have gone up over the years, but just a few weeks ago, I had somebody contact me and they had a photo of their parents' wedding. And it was the only photo that was remaining of their parents' wedding. And there was a crease going through the middle of the photo. And they asked me, is there any way to take that crease off? And I said, sure, I can do that. It wouldn't take that long. It was actually very easy to touch up in Photoshop. So they sent it to me. I did that and I charged them a very small fee because it only took me about 10 minutes to touch it up. So I charged them a very small fee. But if I had something on my website to say that, projects start at $200 or $300 or $500, they might never have contacted me for that job. And why wouldn't I want to take a job that only takes 10 minutes but still pays me enough? And as for the final part of your question, Sean, when you're talking about negotiating, if you give somebody the price and it is above their budget, or if they say, well, I have a budget of $2,000 and you come back and you say, well, I can't do that for $2,000. Personally, I just walk away. If a person comes to me and says, I want a brand new website, this is what I need on the website, I need this and this and this and this and this, and we have a budget of $2,000, and I look at it and I'm thinking, this is a $4,000 website? Before I go into all my details and planning and creating my quote and presenting it to them, I'll come out and I'll tell them, I'll say, listen, for what you're asking, your budget is way too low. Either we have to kind of negotiate some of the specs of the job, not the price. We have to negotiate the specs of the job. You have to do away with this and this and this, or this is not feasible and I won't be able to do the job for you. I had to do this recently for a web client. They wanted a beautiful website for their showroom, displaying all their wares and all that. And they gave me what their budget was. And then he said, I want to be able to sell all these different things on the website, creating kind of an e-commerce site with all these different wares. And when he told me the budget, I told him, I says, you don't have the budget for that. If you want to create a good working e-commerce store where you can collect payments and organize all the shipping and all that stuff, it's going to cost you much more than what you're telling me your budget is. And when we sat down and discussed all this stuff, they agreed that they didn't have the budget to do that part, but they really wanted the website in order to drive people in to their brick and mortar store. That was the whole purpose of creating the website, is to get people into the store. To them, selling stuff through the website was just an extra perk. And when I told them how much it would cost, they quickly said, well, it's not worth that price because it wasn't their main focus. So in cases like that, I saw that the project was way beyond their budget. And when I explained situations to them, they narrowed down the project in order to fit within their budget until we finally agreed. But as far as dropping prices, I will never drop my price if it doesn't meet a client's budget. I will offer to the client, as I said, to eliminate certain parts of the project in order to fit within their budget, or I will just tell the client, sorry, but I can't do it for that price. So I don't know if I answered your question, Sean, that I'm just one person and I have a certain way of doing things and other people might disagree with me. And I would ask for people to share their opinions. Once again, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 50 and leave a comment in the show notes. Do you agree with how I answered Sean's question? Do you deal with budgets differently? Do you want to know a client's budget before you even sit down and talk with them? Or are you willing to lower your prices in order to meet a client's budget if they say they can't go any higher? The comments section of the show notes for this podcast are there for you to answer those questions yourself. So that's it for this week's episode. I want to thank you once again for tuning in to episode number 50. If you've been in from the beginning or if you've gone back and listened to all the episodes, I just want to say how grateful I am for your support. I'm truly doing this for you. I mean, I could be spending this time designing and making money, but I just love sharing my knowledge with you. And as long as you keep wanting it, I'll keep producing it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the topic that I was going to talk about today, which was presenting to your clients, will be next week's podcast episode. In the meantime, please join us over in the Facebook group, resourcefuldesigner.com/group, where we have some great discussions all about running a graphic design business. such as this week's resource that Dan shared, which is Top Tracker, a free resource available for Windows, Mac, and Linux to keep track of the time you spend on your projects. And if that's something that interests you, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/tracker. Until next time, I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business, and as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.